What do you say, everybody? With Andrew Bone, I'm Mick Gillespie, and this is our morning show, the Bama Factor Daily. We're going to give you all the latest news on Alabama. We're going to try to do this every single day. He's Andrew Bone, the Bama insider recruiting expert. Of course, we're the Alabama rival site. I'm Mick Gillespie. Lots to talk about, Bone. I can get into so many different things right now concerning the Crimson Tide. But as we talk today, I still think the big story is the coaching situation. Steve Sarkisian goes to Texas, and then all of a sudden you got a group of coaches going with him. You got a coach going to Arkansas State to be the head coach. You got a coach going to Marshall to be a head coach. Who's going with them? You know, the impact of that. A new offensive coordinator will Golding stay at Alabama, right? Will. So there's so many questions to ask. First off, great to see you.
Yeah, man. How you been?
Good. I better button my button here. But go ahead. Tell us.
Yeah, sorry I missed you down at where were you? Weren't you hanging out down in Tuscaloosa for the national championship down at Rounders?
Yeah, look, we had we're Grant and Scotty Mack, the whole crew there. I had no idea what was national championship game day on the Strip. I got the full experience. The funniest part about it, I mean, not to digress here, but we do a pregame show, not expecting that, before the game, there'd be a bunch of students there and some trying to get in. I mean, they were definitely restricted on how many people they could have in there, but, a decent crowd. And we had the DJ was going, and like, oh my goodness, Trey and I had to turn the music off so we could do our show, and I thought they're gonna hate us. And when we got done, they were cheering, and I thought, okay, it's gonna be good. We had 75,000 people watch that show, so. And then I got out on the Strip afterwards and made that viral video. I'm just pat myself on the back of the dude on top of CVS swinging his shirt around.
There you go.
Yeah. So that was my national.
Well, it wasn't me. So just so everybody know that it wasn't me swinging my shirt on top of CVS.
They said, well, hold on. They said that the cops came down and pepper sprayed everybody. I made some videos for the site. You can check them out on right here on the Bama Insider YouTube channel. Just so we'd have some content, like singing Dixieland Delight and Sweet Home Alabama, and people going nuts, and the whole street was packed. I got out of there when the getting was good. I mean, like at my age now, I know when the cops might be coming, right? And I see so I went to Jimmy John's, and I heard like, well, maybe there was some pepper spray. The only pepper spray I know was what I put on my Jimmy John's roast beef sub after I made all the videos. I got out there when the getting was good, but. What an experience, man! And as a couple of graduates, roll Tide, man. God, now we've got all the stuff to talk about.
Yeah, my wife and I we drove down the Strip. I guess a couple hours before kickoff, we were in Tuscaloosa spending time with my family. We actually had COVID during Christmas. Somebody mentioned on our show one night, they said, Andrew looks kind of sick. And I was. I had I did the show one night. We had Audrey and I both had COVID, but got over it. Obviously, no major issues or anything. But so we didn't get a chance to spend Christmas with our family. So that was kind of different, but we were finally able to go down to Tuscaloosa, spend time with my family, and it was kind of cool because we went to their home and watched the national championship. I've been very fortunate to be at every national championship during the Nick Saban era. So this was the first time that I hadn't been to one, but to watch it with my parents down in Tuscaloosa, who got to enjoy the Bear Bryant years. And, they were in school during the Coach Bryant era. And, I was in school during the Mike Shula era. So they love to, tell me about, how great their time was at Alabama. And I get to talk about how Alabama never beat Auburn during my time in Tuscaloosa. So, things are a little bit different now.
Bone, like you talk about, you didn't beat Auburn. We didn't beat Tennessee.
Yeah, that's right.
Before you, right? I mean, like,
yeah.
I promise you, we're going to get into all this coaching stuff. But look, I mean, you bring up a great point. Like, people, you're spoiled right now.
Right.
And to think that Tennessee's program has sunk to these lows, it's unbelievable to me, because I remember, like you saying, like, where Alabama wasn't good, they looked a lot like Tennessee in their press conference yesterday, with where they just didn't know which way to go, and they're trying to figure out how to get. When you're losing, it's weird how when you're losing, all of a sudden the long knives come out for you. Like, it's like, hey, this violation, or this academic, or this coach at another sport. We saw it at Alabama. We had our own people turn us in. Some of them still work there, by the way, for recruiting violations, and put the program in a spot where we didn't win for a long time. And you and I went to school in a time where they were still dealing with the internal strife of not winning at football. When you win at football like we have right now, the money's there and everybody just seems to zip it,
Right.
But we didn't beat Tennessee when I was in school.
Yeah. I mean, it was some struggle years. Yeah. I remember, the best year I had when I was down at Alabama was, the Cotton Bowl in 2005. Yeah. Alabama, I talked to a lot of my friends from college, and I mean, that's their their fondest memory from college is, unfortunately, it was the same game that ended Prothrow's career, but but that catch on that first play of that first offensive play of the game for Alabama against Florida, 80-yard touchdown pass, from Brody to Tyrone, and that the whole stadium. I mean, that's the loudest, I can remember Bryant Denny. I mean, it went from that and then the next time I heard it that loud was probably the Terrence Cody block against Tennessee. And it was the 2009 season. So there weren't a lot of exciting moments, but now we've seen this, incredible dynasty run for Alabama, and it's been a lot of fun. I mean, obviously, Alabama fans that are, a little bit older got to enjoy the Bear Bryant years, but the Alabama fans that, are in their, early 40s, all the way, I guess, now the kids that are, watching them, my nephews, I had a few nephews, 3 of my nephews were at the Alabama, game on Monday night, and one of them ended up being on television. So, they got to experience that and enjoy it, and they don't know the down years. So there have been down years. I promise you, to the young fans that are watching the show, there have been some down years, but now we're getting to everyone's getting to enjoy it, and recruiting's been a lot of fun to cover it. As many people know, I started recruiting Mike Shula's first year at Alabama, and to get a 4-star on campus was a huge deal. To get a 4-star commitment was a huge deal. There weren't a lot of 5-star commitments back then. There was, sometimes getting a 5-star on campus here and there. Tim Tebow ended up visiting Alabama, but a lot of people thought he was going to end up going to Alabama, but that just wasn't going to happen. He was always going to go to Florida, but there were some interesting years. And then it seemed like, I think there was one year Alabama got like 10 4-star commitments or signees, and everyone was so excited. But now it's like
those are the days, right?
Yeah. Now, I mean, now there may be 5 total max 3-stars in a recruiting class. So, it's a lot of, a lot of changes, but it's certainly been a lot of fun to cover. And, I know we're about to get into talking about a lot of these, new guys that have now arrived on campus, and, what's going to happen kind of with the coaching changes. And, coaching changes were different back then as they are now, because as long as you still have the guy that's, the captain of the ship, it doesn't really matter, because, kids still want to play for Nick Saban. Right.
And I mean, and that's what this really is all about. It's about Nick Saban and what he's built. We've been through this before. Sometimes, he's able to build staffs that I look at, like this particular staff that that hung around for a few years. And I mean, look, they're jumping ship now, but I don't blame them. I mean, they have opportunities to move up, to get better jobs. They earn those. The tough part is that when you're Alabama, at this point working for Nick Saban, is that you're on this status where they're not poaching the entire Clemson staff, the entire Ohio State staff, the entire LSU staff. It's one or two guys. Alabama seems to every few years have to go through this, but it's also part of this dynasty that the Crimson Tide have built. Bill O'Brien's the new offensive coordinator. I've seen a lot of negative comments about him, Bone. I'd say people need to back off a little bit. This guy last year had his team in the NFL playing for a chance to go to the Super Bowl, right? Remember the 24-point lead over the Chiefs, who won? I mean, I know they didn't win the football game, but look, Nick Saban knows what he's doing as far as going out and getting talent and people that are going to fit what he's doing. And to me, Bill O'Brien seems like he's a really good fit, a big name, and a guy who can step in here immediately and bring some credibility.
Yeah, absolutely. And you got a guy that has a lot of NFL head coaching experience. Obviously, people know about his time at Penn State. I mean, he took over the Penn State program at the absolute, worst time ever for the Nittany Lions and turned that program around. I mean, this is a guy who, had some years working for Bill Belichick. He was, very, very smart guy, very structured guy. I think him and Saban are, in my opinion, going to be two peas in a pod. I mean, I just think it's going to I think it's a pretty good match. This is also a guy who, has worked with Deshaun Watson. I think he's going to be, just fine for Alabama, especially, only having a role as being the offensive coordinator. He is a head coach and general manager for the Houston Texans, an NFL organization. How difficult is that? To be a GM and the head coach of an NFL program.
Look, no doubt about it. So, and his name's popping up as a possible replacement at Tennessee. Wouldn't that be something if he goes to Tennessee before we ever have him coach a game for Alabama? But all right, well, let's take a look at the coaching situation right now. Alabama's got all these guys going in different directions. And then, your expertise is in recruiting. I saw someone on the board here mentioning, hey, Kamar Wheaton's going to go to Texas. Remember, he committed to Alabama, but he didn't sign with Alabama. He can't do that until February. Give us the latest on what the recruits and the signees are feeling about all these changes. Is anyone considering going into the transfer portal? And can they do that? I mean, before they even played a game? I've heard the case at Tennessee where some of these guys who committed to Tennessee and signed with Tennessee are already leaving.
Yeah, with Alabama, things are a little bit different because, in my opinion, they don't necessarily commit to an assistant coach. Not at Alabama. People are wanting to play for Nick Saban. They're wanting to play for the University of Alabama. This is a program that's won 6 national championships in the last 12 years. It's not, these kids aren't disappointed. They might be disappointed a little bit. Oh, well, that assistant coach recruited me the entire time. That's who I know the best. That's maybe one of the reasons why I committed. But for the most part, I think that everybody kind of assumes that, these coaches aren't going to be there, for 2 or 3 years or 4 years, all 4 years when they're going to be in school. I was talking to a parent the other day and, about Coach Flood. And they told me, they said, we'd rather him leave now than leave a couple years into their career, just so that they can, develop a relationship with somebody else and have that relationship throughout, the next couple of years, rather than have a relationship for a year, then he leaves and then have to build another relationship or learn a new scheme or learn terminology, stuff like that. So, I think with Alabama's recruiting class right now, the good thing is, the majority of all these guys have already signed. The only player that hasn't signed is Kamar Wheaton. Somebody asked, why hasn't Kamar Wheaton signed yet? Well, he couldn't. He didn't sign during the early signing period. He committed to Alabama after the early signing period and did not sign. So he's still out there. Now, will he potentially go somewhere else? We don't know. As we've said for the last 6 months regarding Kamar Wheaton. He doesn't talk to anybody, doesn't do any interviews, doesn't say anything. But we do talk to people close to him. And I have talked to people close to him over the course of the last couple of weeks, regarding the Sark news, regarding, Charles Huff leaving, and, regarding Jeff Banks. Jeff Banks was his lead recruiter. It's kind of interesting because, this is a guy who does not speak to the media at all, but he also didn't really speak to the coaches. I think coaches were surprised when he committed to Alabama, in the get-go. So it's not like he's all disappointed that, these assistant coaches have left the program. He committed to Alabama. He committed to Nick Saban. Guess who's now the lead recruiter for Kamar Wheaton? Nick Saban. I think Nick Saban over anybody.
Let me stop you, Bill. And I'm just curious, as a guy who doesn't know recruiting like you do, how does that happen? And when Nick Saban becomes your lead recruiter, is that like, look, we're bringing Mariano Rivera out of the bullpen? Like we're the greatest closer of all times. Is Nick Saban the greatest closer of all times?
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about it. The recruits that he's been able to pull in from, coast to coast every single year. Especially when he goes in home. This is kind of a weird year, 2020. Not being able to go into recruits' homes and visit with their families and sit down with them. That's kind of been different for a lot of programs this year, obviously, for every program. And especially for, Alabama, Nick Saban. Nick Saban loves to go, sit down in a living room, spend time with the family, make them feel comfortable. Even for the kids that are committed, you want to make their families feel comfortable, about their kids going to Alabama. And I think that's what Nick Saban does. And, a lot of people, that's why they're perfectly fine with Alabama or their kids going to Alabama, because they know that Nick Saban is going to be a disciplinarian. He's going to look after their kids. He's going to look after their best interests, and he's always going to stay on top of them. So, I think that's why you hardly ever see a lot of kids decommit from Alabama. Now, there's some, and that's going to happen in every recruiting class. But, for the most part, Alabama can hang on to the majority of its top commitments year in and year out. And, Nick Saban's a big part of that. And, with Coach Saban, really taking over the recruitment of Kamar Wheaton over the course of the next few weeks. Now, like I said, everybody's asking me about Texas and if he's going to flip to Texas. He really hasn't been a top target for Texas. Texas's top target right now is a Rivals 100 running back from Texas, L.J. Johnson. L.J. Johnson may be making a decision this week. It seems like the top two is Texas and Texas A&M. Now, a lot of people think probably going to go to Texas A&M, but Texas is very intriguing to him, and he really likes Texas a lot. So we're kind of waiting to see what happens there. If L.J. Johnson ends up committing to Texas A&M, does that mean that Coach Sark, Coach Banks are going to go full steam ahead at Kamar Wheaton? I think that would be a little crappy on their part, just because, he was recruited to Alabama. He's committed to Alabama, and now they're trying to get him to flip.
Is that unethical in the recruiting, in the football business? I mean, we kind of saw Kirby Smart do some of that stuff. You remember when he went to Georgia, and it left some bad feelings. I mean, like, people telling me off the record that there were some bad feelings about some of the things that Kirby did. Now, I didn't hear as much about that kind of stuff from some of the other coaches, but when you see Talia transfer to Maryland, where, Mike Loxley is, I mean, I get it. You got Bryce Young, but, you kind of scratch your head. And I haven't heard anyone say that. But when, Sark and his guys go to Texas, is it unethical for them to go after a guy who's committed to Alabama?
It seems frowned upon. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you're in a unique position because, you're now the head coach at Texas. The number one running back in the country is from Texas. You want to get another, you want an elite playmaker in your class. Do you say, all right, I'm not going to go after this kid just because, we recruited him to Alabama. He's committed to Alabama. I'm going to stay away and go find somebody else. Or do you say, screw it, I'm trying to win games. I'm going to go after the best absolute players possible, no matter what. I mean, I think it's kind of a double-edged sword. like I said, it is kind of frowned upon. Alabama fans, Alabama coaches are going to be, probably pissed off about it if they do go after him and if he potentially flips. But you got to remember this. Kamar Wheaton, in my opinion, I don't think he committed to Coach Sark. I don't think he committed to Coach Banks. I don't necessarily think he committed to Coach Huff, who's now at Marshall. I think he committed to the University of Alabama because that's where he wants to go. That's where he feels like can best prepare him for the NFL. He wants to play for Nick Saban. When he made his decision, it was between Alabama and Oklahoma. It wasn't between Alabama and Texas. Texas wasn't even in his top 5, during his recruitment. So, it would be a big change. Texas goes after him and decided to flip. But as of right now, from talking to people close to Kamar Wheaton, he is solid with his commitment to Alabama. Now, will he potentially listen to, recruiting pitch from Coach Sark? We don't know. We're just all kind of having to wait and see what happens. But at the same time, we didn't think Alabama was even going to sign a running back in this year's recruiting class because of how good the running back depth chart looks. This was a special addition to Alabama's class, and getting Kamar Wheaton, I think he's going to be a special player at the college level. And I think that with Coach Saban and the way that he loves to use a plethora of running backs, he could certainly be a special talent in Tuscaloosa. So we'll have to wait and see. But as of right now, I still feel pretty confident that he's going to stick with Alabama, regardless of what happens at Texas. And, like I said, Nick Saban took over that recruitment. You got to like Alabama's chances there.
Appreciate all you guys hanging out with us. This is our brand new daily show, Bama Factor. Our daily look at Alabama. Thumbs up, subscribe to our channel. We're closing in, if you can believe this, Bone, on 50,000 subscribers here. And it's all because of you guys. We're not taking any of the credit. You're the ones that make this thing go. You're the ones that have brought us so much momentum, and we appreciate you, whether you're Alabama fans, alumni, or you just love college football, or you're just hanging out with us. Subscribe, give us a thumbs up, and again, I hope you're having a great day. 10 o'clock, we're going to be on every day, 10 o'clock, with some sort of show. So today's Bone and I, Kyle Henderson, Tony Sukalis, Trey Yanity, our entire crew will be involved throughout the week as we keep you updated on Alabama. All right, Bone, let's talk about the players that Alabama has coming in. Who do you think has the best chance to make an early impact on the field?
Well, when I look at players who are true freshmen who can come in and make a immediate impact, I always look at the early enrollees, and Alabama was very fortunate to get 15 early enrollees already on campus, which is a huge number. Obviously it's very beneficial to just be a part of the program, get accustomed to being on campus, taking classes, getting used to all of their surroundings, but also going through the winter workouts, going through the fourth quarter program, going through spring practice. Last year, obviously a lot of the early enrollees didn't get a chance to go through spring practice, and Malachi Moore, didn't enroll until the summer, but had an unbelievable year. And usually it doesn't work out that way. Usually we see true freshmen that arrive earlier are the ones who make the biggest impact early on in their career. But it was awesome to see what Malachi was able to do. Will Anderson, obviously the freshman of the year, college football, unbelievable year for him. But I look at some of these guys who are already enrolled on campus. What are your biggest positions of need that you met, and who's leaving? And I think you got to look at the offensive line. Offensive line's pretty difficult to evaluate. And it's extremely tough for an offensive lineman, an 18-year-old kid, to come in on an offensive line and be ready to go up against these SEC defensive linemen. But I think there's two guys in this class that are pretty special. They're both ranked in the Rivals 100 top 10, and that's J.C. Latham and Tommy Brockermeyer. I think with Alabama losing some guys on the offensive line, Alex Leatherwood, Landon Dickerson, Deontay Brown. There's going to be some opportunities there for some of these offensive linemen to come in and make an early impact. And I think Latham and Brockemeyer certainly have a chance to play early. Wide receiver position, especially with Devontae Smith leaving, Jalen Waddle leaving. That's going to be 2 first-round wide receivers, and that's going to be back-to-back years where Alabama's lost 2 first-round receivers. So you're losing a lot of talent at that position. Now, obviously, there's some talent coming back. But I think with this recruiting class, especially at the wide receiver position, 4 Rivals 100 wide receivers signed in December. 3 of those guys already on campus, and Christian Leary, Ajay Hall, Ja'Cory Brooks. I'm really looking for Ja'Cory Brooks to potentially make an early impact at Alabama. But I think any of these guys, have the athletic ability. They all had great senior seasons. Christian Leary, a lot of people, believe that he can come in, be a Jalen Waddle type player. The same with JoJo Earl. I mean, JoJo Earl is one of the most spectacular athletes in the country out of Texas. But the only reason I'm kind of, hesitant on him, making the biggest early impact at the wide receiver group is just because he's not enrolling early. He's going to get there in the summer. So these guys have a little bit of a leg up just being there early, building that, relationship with the quarterbacks and, just going through spring practice. So those are 2 position groups that I'm really kind of looking at now. In the defensive backfield, Alabama did sign 1 junior college player in Kyrie Jackson. Kyrie is not enrolling early. I think if he would have enrolled early, I think there was unbelievable chance for him to come in and potentially even start right away. But I do think whenever you recruit a junior college player, there's a specific reason, because one, it's a big need. You want the guy to come in and make an early impact, and you also believe in him. You believe that he's got the athletic ability to come in and start right away. So I'd look at Kyrie Jackson, regardless of him enrolling in the summer. JaQuincy McKinstry Kool-Aid just won Mr. Football the other night for the state of Alabama. He's finally focusing on just football. Now he plans on playing basketball next year, but he is skipping his senior year to play basketball at Pinson Valley, to move to Alabama or move down to Tuscaloosa, start his career on the football team, really focus on football. And he's also not playing 2 positions. In high school, went both ways, played offense, played wide receiver, defensive back. Now he's just focused in on defensive back. I think, him already getting on campus, getting acclimated with everything, I think he's got a great chance to contribute early. May not start right away, but I think he's going to contribute.
He's Andrew Bone. I'm Mick Gillespie. Good morning, everybody. This is our Bama Factor Alabama Daily. I want to say podcast, and some people are actually going to be listening to this as a podcast, and you can get all of our shows. All these shows will be on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Many of you are watching on the Bama Insider YouTube channel. And if you're here watching, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, tell your friends about it. Send a link to your friends and tell them that Andrew Bone sent you and say, Roll Tide. Bone, all right, we talked about Kool-Aid. I could definitely see him with Patrick Surtain and some of these other guys going to the NFL and graduating, being a starter right away. Is there still room for anyone else in the 2021 class? And then how about 2022 after that and some of the targets that Alabama is going after? I mean, obviously, there's going to be different coaches trying to chase these guys down.
Yeah, let me hit on the 2021 guys first. There's still some guys that Alabama's still going after pretty strong. Obviously, still trying to, make sure Kamar Wheaton's all good and make sure you sign him. That's really the only, Alabama commitment that's still unsigned. So you got to make sure you get him on board. There's still 3 guys that we've often talked about on the website on BamaInsider.com, and that's Terrion Arnold, JT Tuamola, and Brian Thomas. With JT Tuamola, 5-star defensive lineman, from the Seattle, Washington area. A lot of people think that because Coach Sark left, that it kind of eliminates Alabama. Yes, he was the lead recruiter for a while. Yes, they did have a relationship. But, what many people don't know is, Freddie Roach, Alabama defensive line coach, really kind of took over that recruitment, several months ago. He's been the one that he's, really developed a strong relationship with. That's going to be his position coach, if he were to choose Alabama. I really wouldn't worry too much, about Coach Sark leaving and how that affects JT Tuimoloau. I think Alabama is still in the running for him. As of right now, I'd probably say Alabama, Ohio State, Oregon, probably the top three. I know he also has Washington and USC as finalists as well, but I think top three are, probably the most consistent with him right now. And, as of right now, I don't know if he's going to make a decision on signing day. He wants to wait until he's able to take some more visits. He wants to get back to, all these different campuses and check them out one more time. So he could potentially extend this through the spring. So we're going to kind of, watch that pretty closely over the next few months. But Alabama still very much in the picture with him now. Terrion Arnold, we see all these different rumors on Terrion Arnold. It seems like there's a different rumor on him every single day. What Alabama fans need to know is Alabama still very, very strongly in the picture with Terrion Arnold. Rivals 100 defensive back from Tallahassee. In my opinion, I think it's an Alabama-Georgia recruiting battle. Florida, has been there, but Florida just, losing, two defensive back coaches. I think that hurts them a good bit. Could he potentially still end up at Florida? Maybe so. I mean, he's an in-state kid for the Gators, still a priority target for them. But in my opinion, as of right now, I think it's an Alabama-Georgia battle. He's going to try to visit both at least all three of the schools before making that decision on February the 3rd. But Alabama still very strongly in the picture with him. And then Brian Thomas, the 4-star wide receiver from Louisiana. A lot of people have been saying that Alabama's kind of, finished recruiting him. That's just not true. Just because Alabama signed 4 Rivals 100 wide receivers doesn't necessarily mean that they've stopped recruiting Brian Thomas. They've always had Brian Thomas as a priority target. They've always liked him a lot. They've always considered him an elite player. But, at the same time, there's not a lot of spots left. So, if JT Tuimoloau, Terrion Arnold decide, hey, we're going to go ahead and commit, we're going to sign, go ahead and sign with Alabama, then, Brian Thomas may not have a spot. So, those are the 3 guys that Alabama's heavily recruiting that they want to add. Can they get 1? Can they get 2? I don't think they're going to get all 3 of them. But if they get 1 of them, this is going to be a pretty spectacular class. And if they get 2, that would be just, obviously amazing. Shifting focus a little bit to 2022. I mean, you got to look at, what's going to happen with the assistant coaches. Who's Alabama going to bring in? They're going to have to reevaluate a lot of these kids. And they're going to have to figure out, all right, this is how many players we're going to take at this position, at that position. Who's coming back to the team next year? Is there anybody that's, potentially going to add their name to the transfer portal? There's just a lot of, unknowns that are still out there. And then, also with this 2022 recruiting class, there really hasn't been a lot of evaluations. There were, a lot of these kids that have that played during their during their junior season. So there's a lot of film out there, but coaches weren't going to high school games. They didn't have summer camps. They didn't have spring evaluations. So a lot of, the majority of these kids haven't ever even been seen in person. They're just having to go off of film. And, that's not something that coaches typically want to do. They've had to do it, but they like to see these guys in person, kind of size them up. And, there was a lot of kids that were able to go to junior day last year before, the NCAA shut down recruiting visits. But, it doesn't look like there's going to be any junior days this year. The recruiting dead period has been extended until April the 15th. Maybe they'll, remove it. Maybe they'll extend it. We just don't know that, yet because of COVID. Everybody's kind of waiting to see. But, there are a lot of guys out there that Alabama's heavily recruiting. I just put out my first Alabama 2022 recruiting big board on BamaInsider.com. It's a breakdown of every single player that's high on Alabama's recruiting board at every position: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, all the way to defensive back. Kind of the top early targets. And it doesn't necessarily mean that Alabama would take every single one of those guys, but they're at least very high on them, that they're looking at them, they're evaluating them. Obviously, a lot of those guys would be takes, but at the same time, they still want to evaluate these kids properly and look at them. And they also want to get, the new assistant coaches in. See if these guys like them, because if they don't like them, if they say, hey, that guy's not good enough, we don't, I want to go after this kid. Once they kind of sit down in the bullpen and talk to Coach Saban, talk to the rest of the staff, and say, all right, let's move on from that guy. Let's go to this guy. That's going to happen. That happens every single day at Alabama. They have a recruiting meeting just about every single morning, and they discuss who's going to be their top targets, who has moved ahead of this guy, who's dropped a little bit based on film. There's kids that are probably, maybe in their, I'd say probably in their top, 100 on Alabama's recruiting board a year, let's say 6 months ago, who may not even be a target anymore. It just happens every single day where they're evaluating and trying to figure out who's going to be their, premier target. So, if you see a guy that, is a 5-star right now that doesn't have Alabama in his top group, and you see a 3-star that has Alabama in his top 3, doesn't necessarily mean that, that, wow, Alabama's recruiting's falling off. Maybe it means Alabama's more interested in that 3-star than they are in that 5-star. We did this last year. We did this whole thing last year where Alabama was, number 65 in recruiting. The recruiting was falling off. North Carolina and Tennessee are programs that are killing Alabama on the recruiting trail, and everybody was all up in arms because this was the beginning of the end for Alabama, and Alabama's assigned one of the best classes of all time. So just be patient. Let it kind of all play out. But we went ahead and, like I said, did the complete big board early on. There's going to be a lot of names that get dropped off. There's going to be a lot of names that get added over the course of the next few months, especially with more spring evaluations going on. So, but I encourage you to take a look at it, see who's on there, who's not, and we'll see what it looks like here in the next few months.
He's Andrew Bone. I'm Mick Gillespie. Great to have you with us here on the Bama Insider YouTube channel, or maybe you're listening on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. We appreciate you being here with us. This is our Bama Factor daily show. We're going to do this every day, 10 o'clock, live on YouTube, and then we'll post it as a podcast right after. Okay, let me ask you this. Alabama lost a lot of assistants, and they may even lose some more, right? I mean, it just depends on, who goes where. I mean, with Charles Huff going to Marshall, you figure he might take somebody with him. Sark left, Butch Jones left. But the guy that I'm hearing a lot as far as like the biggest loss for Alabama recruiting wise is Jeff Banks. I don't know anything about this, to be honest with you, Bone. I don't know Jeff Banks other than, just what you guys tell me. And I think there's a lot of us that feel this way. Who do you think has the potential biggest impact for Alabama leaving? And of the guys that stayed, are there some coaches where Nick Saban said, look, I can't let this guy go. We're going to have to pay him more money. We're going to have to promote him because of the recruiting aspect of his game?
Yeah, I think, it seems like just about every other year Alabama, loses a top recruiter. And, a lot of it's because, they're going to either get, a pretty hefty pay raise. They're going to get a head coaching job or a coordinator position. And, obviously Jeff Banks was, I think a big loss in the state of Texas. But Alabama's recruited Texas well, not as well as they have this year, but they had 2 guys that recruited Texas for Alabama this year, and that's Jeff Banks and Carl Scott. I think if you lose Carl Scott, that would be a pretty big blow in the state of Texas for Alabama. You lose your top 2 guys who recruit the Lone Star State. But Jeff Banks, I thought did a great job this year. Not only recruiting Texas, but also recruiting Central Florida. He was the lead recruiter for Ajay Hall and Christian Leary. So did a great job recruiting those guys. But in my opinion, I think Charles Huff. I thought Coach Huff was unbelievable this year. I think he's probably the front runner for the Rivals.com National Recruiter of the Year. Did a great job recruiting South Florida, IMG Academy. Also went up to Michigan, landed Damon Payne. Flipped Devontae Smith from Ohio State. He was just an animal on the recruiting front this year, and I think he was, in my opinion, a lot of people knew that he was probably going to be a head coach somewhere. A lot of people thought that last year, that he was going to get a head coaching opportunity. Stayed another year, and I think Alabama, Nick Saban probably very thankful that he stuck around another year because all the guys that he was able to land in this recruiting class. But as we've seen year after year, we always wonder, what's Alabama going to be able to do? How are they going to be able to replace this guy in South Florida, or how are they going to be able to replace this guy in Texas or Louisiana, wherever it may be? And Nick Saban always finds somebody that has connections with the area that in some cases they're better than the previous coach in recruiting the area. But at the same time, like I always say, there's one constant in Alabama. It's Nick Saban. As long as he's there, recruiting's not going to fall off. I think that, as long as the program continues to have, a tremendous amount of success, recruits understand that these coaches more than likely won't be there, because they're going to get head coaching opportunities. They're going to get coordinator position opportunities. And I think, that's probably something that's used against Alabama a lot on the recruiting front, by other schools. Hey, you're not going to be coached by that coach when you get there. This coach is, you're going to have 2 or 3 different position coaches, but it doesn't seem to matter to these kids. They want to play for Coach Saban. They want to play for Alabama. I think everything else that Alabama has, the structure, the medical team, the nutrition team, the training staff. I mean, there's just so much.
Right. The fan base, right?
The fan base, the facilities. There's so much more to Alabama than just assistant coaches. The rings, the NFL players. I mean, there's just so much. The All-Americans, the Heisman Trophy winners. The list kind of goes on and on. I mean, it's hard to replace good assistant coaches, but when you're Alabama, you can do it. Obviously, there's some former head coaches in the NFL who are wanting, to be assistants at Alabama. So, as long as Nick Saban's there, there's just really nothing to worry about on the recruiting front.
Look, Bone, final thing that we're going to get into before we wrap up our show. And everyone, look, hanging out with us, thumbs up, subscribe. We're closing in on 50,000. That's like a national championship for us here at the Alabama Rival site, Bama Insider, and our YouTube page. Or if you're listening, Apple, Spotify, you love Andrew Bone, give our podcast 5 stars, and we'll keep putting them up there so you can follow the Crimson Tide throughout the offseason. We've talked a lot about Steve Sarkisian going to Texas. Now, I'm going to throw this out there. 2 years ago, if you would have said, hey, you could have Steve Sarkisian or Bill O'Brien as your offensive coordinator, who would you have taken? Right? I mean, let's put this in perspective now. Bill O'Brien has been an extremely successful head coach. He went into Penn State in the depths of one of the worst situations in college football history, right? With everything that went on there, and did really well. Steve Sarkisian was a coach at Washington, did okay. A coach at USC, and was fired in shame, right? He came to Alabama and was the offensive coordinator for 1 game, and then went to the NFL right after the Falcons went to the Super Bowl. Didn't do too well. Came back to Alabama as the offensive coordinator and inherited the best 4 receivers on one team in the history of college football, the best offensive line Alabama's ever had, and he did a great job with it, right? Meanwhile, Bill O'Brien goes to the NFL. He's got his team in the playoffs almost every single year. Then becomes the GM, makes some moves that cost him. His GMing was not so great. But you got to give the guy a lot of credit. You turn around, this guy's in the playoffs every year. They were close. They lost to the champs, the Super Bowl champ Chiefs last year, and had a 24-point lead, right? So I put Sark up there because there's this feeling, at least I kind of get the sense that there's Bama fans that are saying, what a step down it is to lose Steve Sarkisian and get Bill O'Brien. I say Nick Saban's done it again because Bill O'Brien knows how to have an explosive offense. We saw it with the Deshaun Watson in the NFL, what he was able to do there. He's been way more successful than Steve Sarkisian. and now Alabama has him in Tuscaloosa. Give me your pros and cons. I think this is going to be an upgrade for Alabama.
Yeah, I don't know about an upgrade. I think the jury's still kind of out for me. I just don't know. Obviously, I've watched Bill O'Brien's career, and I've seen what he's been able to do with very little. So I'm interested to see what he's able to do in Tuscaloosa with a ton of talent. He's going to have the keys to the kingdom. What's he going to be able to do with it? Especially with this class coming in, special offensive line, wide receiver group, Kamar Wheaton, as long as he sticks on board. I mean, he's got a lot of things to work with, including all the guys that are coming back. There's just a lot of, offensive players, especially Bryce Young. How special can Bryce Young turn out to be? Because, Steve Sarkisian, I don't think anybody imagined Mac Jones being what Mac Jones was this season. And, he had an unbelievable year. And, Coach Sark, rejuvenated his career. I think, working for Coach Saban, I think when he first, arrived and became the offense coordinator again at Alabama, everybody was just kind of like, okay, we'll see how this goes this time. And, it was an unbelievable 2 seasons. I think people are too critical early on Bill O'Brien becoming the offense coordinator because we don't know. I mean, people were critical on Lane Kiffin. People weren't sure if Mike Locksley should be the offense coordinator. People weren't sure if, Coach Sark should be the offense coordinator. Well, Alabama should go after, Alabama can go get anybody. They went and hired Sark. Maybe one of the best offense coordinators of all time in Tuscaloosa, if not the best. Let's see what happens. The talent's there. I think he's got probably a lot to be thankful for if that's the case, that he's going to be, as long as he doesn't leave and go to Tennessee or go somewhere else. I mean, I think he's got a great opportunity to prove a lot of people wrong. I'm interested. Obviously he's coming from the NFL, so he's going to have to get used to recruiting again. But he's been able to do that. It's not like he's been an NFL guy his whole life and coming in and just learning how to recruit. This guy knows how to recruit. So give him some time, and I think things are going to be just fine. Alabama fans, always worry about what's going to happen next. Everybody always wonder, well, when's Alabama going to win national championship again? Oh my gosh, there's all these kids that are leaving. They're not going to win it next year. And then the next season comes and Alabama's in the race, and we're thinking, oh, well, this is one of the best teams that we've ever seen. So just give us some time and see how it all plays out. I do think I still think it's probably going to be a little bit of a rebuilding year for Alabama, especially on the offensive side of the ball. But the talent's there. Can they pick it up quick enough and learn? And we saw a lot of freshmen step up on the defensive side of the ball this year. Are we going to see freshmen step up on the offensive side of the ball next year? Or this upcoming season? That's going to be the key to probably Alabama, competing for another national championship.
He's Andrew Bone. I'm Mick Gillespie. Give us a thumbs up. Subscribe to our channel. This is the Alabama Rivals site. Whether you're listening to the podcast, Apple, Spotify, or you're watching on the YouTube channel, this is Bama Insider TV on YouTube, and this is our new show that we're going to do every day at 10 o'clock to keep you updated on things going on around the Crimson Tide. Bama Factor daily. All right, look, Bone. Now, what do you see here?
I see Malachi Moore's helmet.
Yeah, no, this is what's signed by Gene Stallings. But do you remember when what I'm talking about is like I saw a sale on on all the 17s now because we got to switch to 18, and you kind of reminded me of that, talking about like the different championships. When we were in school, it was 12. It was 12. Yeah. Think about
it for the longest time.
Yeah, like our both of our buddies, Jay Barker, he was the last
That's right.
championship quarterback, right? And he's an awesome dude, by the way, and a good friend. But it's like, forever it was him. Now he's got all this company, which he actually likes. Think about it. He's got another championship quarterback to share the wealth with, right? I mean, you go through all these guys to turn around. But I want to kind of finish the show. You brought something up. I was going to close it, but I want to talk about Tennessee just because, like, kind of going back to where we started. We've been there and done that. I saw that press conference yesterday, and honestly, like, I know some of those people. I think Randy Boyd, the president, is one of the greatest people I know. I work for him, so I know him. He's an awesome guy, right? I know Coach Fulmer. He's a legendary coach. It brought back so many memories to me of where Alabama was before they got – well, really, and I want to say maybe it was even before – Saban showed up, but it was Mal Moore coming in and kind of stabilizing things, building the facility. I feel like for Tennessee, and this is what I thought, I wouldn't want to be the guy to take this job now because you got all the NCAA stuff swirling, and it's almost like Jeremy Pruitt was kind of, well, he's going to be the guy to get to the guy, right? And now I feel like, well, now whoever takes this job doesn't know what the situation's going to be. So maybe it's Kevin Steele, who's the interim coach, that's the guy that gets to the guy. Shula was the guy that got to the guy, right? There comes that point where if you want to go out, and this is just my opinion, but seeing what happened at Alabama, the secret all along was going out and investing as much money as you can throw at the best possible coach, right? And that's what they did. And Mal Moore not only did that, he threw the best facilities out there. So we got past the NCAA stuff and then enticed Nick Saban to come. But I think if there was one thing that I look back and say, okay, this is the turnaround that led us to 13 and 14 and 15 and 16. And now we're going to have 18 on the helmets. And who knows, maybe we'll have 19 soon, the road to 19. But I think it all led back to going out and investing. And the one thing that you can spend more money than the competition on without being penalized, and that's the head coach. How do you think? What do you say about that?
I mean, when I think about Tennessee right now, I always think back to what if Lane Kiffin never left and went to USC? Where would Tennessee be right now? Would they have a top 10 program? Would he have been run out of there a couple of years ago? I think you got to make a big investment, for your head coach. I think you've got to go out and get somebody. You can't just have you can't just have a Shula. You can't just have somebody that you're bringing in for a couple of years until you figure out, who's going to be your next head coach. You got to go out and make a big hire. But does Tennessee, are they willing to do that? I don't know. It might be Kevin Steele. I don't know. It's going to be interesting. Alabama was always a sleeping giant. They were always going to, at some point, they were going to wake up. They were going to make a big hire. Luckily, Rich Rodriguez did not, decide to go to Alabama, and luckily Mal Moore, stuck with his guns and kept fighting to get Saban, and it ended up working out. I mean, best hire in, college football history. And, I think that, Tennessee is going to have to do something. I don't know what they're going to do, but I also don't know if Tennessee's ever going to be back, to what they were, during the Fulmer years. Are they going to be a consistent top 10 program? You're going up against Alabama, you're going up against Georgia, Florida, Texas A&M, you're going up against LSU, Auburn. I mean, these are a lot of programs that, are spending money on college coaches, that are spending money on resources, that are spending, everything they can on, facilities to make sure that they get the top recruits in the country that want to come play there. So it's going to be tough to recruit, to Tennessee. Now you got to keep in-state kids home. You got to, try to land big time out of state. When I first started following recruiting, Tennessee was the program that they could go and get kids from any part of the country.
That's right.
They were getting kids from California. They were getting kids from South Florida. Now, obviously, Alabama's the program now. Georgia's the program now. Those are the two programs in the SEC that I see going and getting kids from any part of the country.
Well, they were getting players from Alabama. I mean, I remember T. Martin from Mobile. They kept getting guys out of that North Alabama quadrant. They were getting players out of Memphis. Every time you turn around, you were losing a battle to Tennessee.
Yep. I remember reading Super Prep magazine back in the day and seeing all these, it's like every single top kid from all across the country they were all going to Tennessee. And I'm thinking to myself, man, I can't believe Alabama can't get any of these players ever. Yeah. But obviously now, I don't know if Super Prep magazine is still around, but
you're the Super Prep guy for this stuff, though. Did you ever think you were going to be the guy that eventually would be the Super Prep type guy when you were reading those magazines?
No, I wrote a couple articles for Super Prep though. It was part of it was a super. So I worked for Scout.com back in the day, 2003. 2003. Is that
still out there? Scout.com? Is it even still existing?
No, I think they ended up merging. But yeah, I mean, that's who I worked for early on in my career, 2003 to 2012. And Super Prep magazine was an affiliate. So I wrote a couple of stories for Super Prep, which is kind of wild because I remember, having Super Prep magazine in high school, looking at it from time to time. But yeah, it was kind of crazy seeing that magazine and writing for it. But, it's crazy. The recruiting magazines are kind of, obsolete now. You never see those really anymore. And, the big thing is because of obviously the internet. I remember writing back in the day for magazines. I wrote for Bama magazine, and you would have to turn your article in or your big feature for the magazine in. It was like a month in advance, and so much changed. Not only throughout the month, but in the week. A kid could be committed, and a person picks up the magazine in the store reading about a kid. Oh, it's top 3 or these schools, and a month later he had committed somewhere else. So it made you look like you didn't know what you were talking about. But I liked it when it was just everybody focused on everything that was going on online rather than writing for a magazine is tough.
No, yeah. Those days when we actually used to look at paper to get our news, right?
For sure.
Anything else before we wrap up our first Bama Factor Daily?
No, I think that's it. As I said earlier, if you are interested in checking out Alabama's big board for the 2022 recruiting class, the early targets at each position, I've posted that on BamaInsider.com, so I encourage you, go check it out. Hey, if you're not a subscriber, go subscribe. Get a 30-day free trial. Check us out. You'll really enjoy it. So, and if you haven't, hit the thumbs up button. We have 280 people watching right now. I know there was over 300 for a while. We need to have 280 plus likes. So hit that thumbs up button.
And those of you that will watch this on the replay, we still need that thumbs up and we still need that subscribe. But yeah, you want to figure out how we're going to get that helmet to 19 and 20. Bones Big Board. Tell you right there, because when you win on signing day, you win on the field as well. All right, he's Andrew Bone. I'm Mick Gillespie. Thanks for joining us again tomorrow at 10 a.m. If you want to watch the show live, subscribe to Bama Insider on YouTube. And thanks for hanging out with us. For those of you that are listening to the podcast, give us a 5-star rating. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Roll Tide.